Welcome to the Pitchwerks podcast. I'm Scot McTaggart. Over the last 20 years, I've been a sales rep, a marketer, a manager, an executive, a consultant, and an advisor. This show is designed to give you access to my list of contacts so that you can learn more about how to present your ideas at work and succeed in your career.
Startups and salespeople, marketers and managers from the Epicast Network in Pittsburgh. It's the Pitchwerks podcast.
And now it's about them taking the idea to people for funding.
Yeah,
we're in a really good spot. And if we're in a competitive situation and we're having that kind of dialogue with the potential end user, we've likely won the technical, the technical bake-off.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey everybody, it's Scott. It's Wednesday and it's Pitchwerks podcast. My good friend Andy Hicks is here and he's going to tell us all about what is going on at Bastion. This is a cool, young cybersecurity startup that really focuses on the details. And Andy has always been successful as a sales rep. Everywhere he's been, I'm always grateful to find out what he's working on. I get to live vicariously through his successes. I think there's a lot in here for everybody. Before we jump in, I'm going to ask you to rate and review this fine program, if only just because it helps other people find it and then decide that they're going to subscribe, which is great for everybody, especially me. Get in there, give us a star rating from 1 to 5. Tell us why you picked that. It's really it's very easy, but also very important. Let's talk to my good friend Andy. Let's find out what's going on over at Bastion. All right, I am truly not exaggerating when I say it warms my heart to be in the same room with my good friend Andy Hicks. Andy, how are you?
I'm awesome, Scott. How are you?
It's weird. It's like you and I are always going a mile a minute, and we've been sharing the same city for all these years, right? But you've got your stuff, which is apparently getting pretty interesting, and I've got, the paltry empire you see before you. So your current project is Bastion,
mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of stories we can mine out of this because you guys aren't afraid of sort of showing everyone on a website level exactly what they're getting into.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was fascinating, and that's one of the main reasons why I thought I should drag you in here, because I want you to help me tell a story a little bit about how much is too much versus not enough. Cybersecurity is the field that you're in. Mm-hmm. It's obviously critically important. Let's get started. Just, if you don't mind, telling people what it is that Bastion is.
Yeah. So we were kind of born out of a cloud and systems integration company based here in Pittsburgh. It's been about a 2-year initiative. We've been live for a year, but essentially Bastion is the cybersecurity division of this organization, where the intense focus is on delivering a managed detection and response program, which really, for lack of a better way of describing it, is us helping our customers play defense.
It's the burglar alarm for your network.
It is with some pretty intricate tools and tripwires that come with it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a little bit of an arms race out there as people are getting more and more of their data stored in more and more places, mm-hmm. right? And again, no criticism.
Yeah.
Just legit. I looked at your website, which
mm-hmm.
is bluebastion.net, if anybody wants to see what I saw. And I was honestly very surprised at how much information was there mm-hmm. for what I've always regarded as sort of like a more casual person, right? The person who comes to your website, and I guarantee you've heard people say this, generally just wants to make sure you're a real company.
Yep.
Have you heard that phrase?
Yep.
People don't really buy from the website. They just want to make sure that, there's some corporate presence. This looks like a grown-up company that, can actually handle an organization of their size. You are, and take this as the compliment it is intended to be, you are legitimately my favorite sales rep I've ever worked with. I think that you are legitimately one of the best sales reps I've ever known.
I appreciate that. The feeling is mutual.
Well, it shouldn't be. The decision to include all that data mm-hmm. was not accidental. You knew that you were making a decision there, mm-hmm. and I want to get inside your head and figure out why.
There were a couple of reasons. In a segment of the cybersecurity market that is dominated by some pretty big brands, brands that may not be household names to most people, but people that are shopping for cybersecurity services or products, there felt like we needed to maybe share more about what we do to overcome maybe some of that lack of brand awareness.
Right.
We also felt as if having experience coming from the manufacturing side and selling products to a lot of folks that were providing managed security services or managed detection and response, one of the big dings from an end user's perspective was just the overall value proposition, right?
Let me slow you down and unpack this, right? So when you say you were coming from the manufacturer side, are you talking about your own personal experience? Because you were in a couple major houses before here.
Yeah, no, personal experience working for probably two of the bigger cybersecurity companies in this country, at least. So, in what I found was the value proposition was lacking, which was where we saw the opportunity. So, very little investment on the front end in the customer relationship, understanding the need, understanding the customer. And so we felt really compelled to be like, look, when you step through our doors, this is the kind of program you're going to be walking into, which is candidly unlike anything that we're seeing in the market today. And there was definitely some trepidation to oversharing.
Yeah. Just maybe even potentially intimidating the person who's not 100% sold on buying anything.
Sure.
And that's always been the thing. Like, wall of text scares away the looky-loo, right?
And the site itself, because we were still, are very much early stage, is informational, right?
Right.
In everything that it kind of represents.
People are looking for things on a shopping list.
Yeah. No. The best. The couple of the pages within the site are, I think, pretty good. The rest, it needs an overhaul from a marketing perspective.
There's a design aspect to everything, but there's also a factual aspect. Yep. I think there's a lot of people selling snake oil in cyber.
It's a huge.
I will interpret your laughter as agreement, sir.
Yeah. No, it's. I think it's a huge problem. I think we're preachy about it, but our stance is that a vast majority of what's being developed and marketed today is for your 1%ers of the market, right? Your giant organizations that have their own security operations teams, have their own cyber teams, and they are, and I get it coming from that background, it's so competitive that pointing out differentiation against your competitor is hugely important. So if you're developing some machine learning or artificial intelligence that is a step ahead of your competitors, awesome, right? You're ahead of the game.
You actually kind of predicted a question that I was leading to, though.
Okay.
And I think it might help you make the point that you're illustrating now, which is there are several segments of the economy, and cybersecurity is definitely one of them, where there is over preference for the top fraction of 1% of clients, if only just because you don't have to tell them what the product is, right? So
they do a lot of their own research. Yep.
Well, but by comparison, right? Like you and I are going to start the Scot and Andy cybersecurity firm. If you like, you can go first. You can be Andy. You can be Andy and Scot. It's all cool.
I don't care. My ego is not big enough.
Mine is. The walk off the street pitch. Like, we come off the sidewalk and we walk in. Hi, I'm Scot. This is Andy. Together, we're Scot and Andy. We'd like to sell you cybersecurity. Is going to be followed up with a flurry of, and I mean no disrespect, rookie questions, right? Like you're going to spend so much time basically tenderizing that client for the next person to come through the door and find a much more willing prospect.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think what we're seeing in the market, though, today is that a vast majority of the folks that are interested in the services and the programs that we've developed have been told they need to be by the market. Well, whether that's an actual partner, whether that's by a prospect or a customer, specific verticals are certainly at risk when it comes to not having a buttoned-up cybersecurity program internally. The legal vertical is a very good example. They're staring at lost revenue opportunities on a daily basis because the customers that they want to bring or the clients they want to bring into their portfolio are challenging them and saying,
You better have this.
What do you have? Here's the checklist. Here's the laundry list of our requirements for you, because you're going to be having you're going to have access to some very, very sensitive data and information. And they take a look at it and say, well, we need to make several investments here. And it goes up to a committee and they're like, yep, not worth it.
That is actually, again, this is leading right down the path that I was kind of talking about. The person that is in that place, that 1% client, there's a lot of people involved, and you end up at several stops on the train, it feels like, talking to someone who doesn't even have a passing understanding of the vernacular. Is that fair? Like, and I don't, again, I'm not trying to kick dirt on people. I'm trying to say the person who passes those requirements to the potential law firm is not a technologist.
No, they can be auditors. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Quite often.
It's somebody who says, okay, we're thinking about hiring a new firm, and this is what my compliance division says that we have to have before we're even allowed to start engaging you. Well,
in our argument is, while compliance is important because it gets funded, compliance isn't security, right?
Right.
It's not. Our approach is, if you take the proper steps to, and this is where we get preachy, stick to the basics. Like, a vast majority of the world who is, they end up getting marketed to, and they say, well, you don't have to worry about these advanced persistent threats. And my comment is, like, believe me, the bad guys don't even have to use those to gain access to your information.
Interesting.
No, I don't. I'm not that,
cocky.
Right.
Yeah.
But the reality is most, if you look at it from an economic perspective, most of the bad guys, they want to return on their investment as well, right? So they're not going to develop some new zero-day attack if they know they can take something that exists today, tweak it a little bit, and then launch it, or do some reconnaissance, some social engineering, and target an easy mark for a spear phishing campaign, right? Because that is expensive. It's very expensive for them to do that. So, where I think the manufacturing side of our equation is not doing a great job is by focusing so much on kind of, smoke and mirrors is a very strong way of putting it, but or dramatic way of putting it, but the corner cases, the advanced persistent threats, they exist, right? And they're very real and they're very scary. They are not used nearly as much as you would imagine based on the marketing you see, because they don't need to. They don't need to be used.
They don't need to be used
in the vast majority of the market.
Because of that investment equation you're doing. You're saying, like, unless you're protecting something that is truly unique and valuable enough to have someone take the time and money and effort to develop something special just for you, it's probably not going to happen as often as the marketing would suggest.
That is true. And another way to illustrate it is, if you and I are sitting down and you're the prospect with several leading questions, I can unearth or uncover pretty quickly whether or not you have the basic blocking and tackling down, right?
Right.
If a question I asked is related to the hygiene or the patching of your environment, and you're like, wow, I'm so busy, I just haven't been able to patch my systems in 3 months. Well, dude, nothing really advanced is going to be required to gain access to the crown jewels or whatever is most valuable to you in your environment.
So you're buying Israel's Iron Dome rocket defense system,
which works.
It works, but
actually,
but you've made it really easy for people just to walk over the border and do what they want.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's an interesting analogy just in itself, right? The idea of, again, all of these different stakeholders don't fully, in my view, just as an outsider looking in, don't fully understand what's the proper order of operations and what's the proper stack of technologies to deploy here. And it has to make your job very education intensive, right?
It is. I mean, it is predominantly again, unless we're in front of somebody because a customer or a third-party partner has told them they need to step their game up, It is. It's largely educational, and it's from a sales cycle standpoint.
That's what I was just gonna ask,
speaking
right.
of sales, this is not a 90-day sale, right? This is an investment far beyond that, but it's also the kind of service that is continuous. Right?
Over the years, you and I have talked about how sometimes in that type of an environment, you've got that education component where people they get frustrated, they push away from the table, and they buy a bad fit, right? And then they come back as the good customer, right?
A year later, yeah.
Yeah, something like that, right? It's like, okay, well, they bought that Iron Dome that someone told them, you have to have this. It's the most important thing. And then some random pack of people just walks across the border unimpeded, and they're like, wow, I guess we probably should have put a fence up too. I'm kind of curious. If it's not 90 days, what is it? Is it a 6-month cycle? Is it a 1-year cycle? I mean, I understand
My favorite answer is it depends.
Yeah,
I know. That's an engineer. It's an engineer's answer. That's it does. It depends, but I would say it's between 90 and 180. But if we're seeing that evidence, that they're getting it, right? They're getting it, and now it's about them taking the idea to people for funding. Yeah, we're in a really good spot. And if we're in a competitive situation and we're having that kind of dialogue with the potential end user, we've likely won the technical, the technical buyer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Are you following that like a Miller-Hyman type of a cycle then? Or I mean, do you have a methodology that you like?
No, the golden rule. Never the wrong time to do the right thing. You and I talked about. I mentioned I'd listened to the Yvonne Campos podcast, and I'd met her one or two times. Just a fascinating person, and wildly intelligent. But talking about values, I mean that has become, as I've gotten older, really really important to me. So whether it's who I decide to do business with or who I target as a customer, if I don't get the sense that they don't have to be, beacons of light, but they
don't all have to be monks. Yeah,
exactly. But all that stuff is important to me. But I think the methodology is simply for us. If you can't see this through the lens of the person or the group that are potentially consuming the product, then we've lost before we even started. So that's
for what you're doing. I love the Miller-Hyman approach. That economic buyer, technical buyer, user buyer. And develop your champions within. Right. But honestly, that one's near and dear to my heart anyway. Right. It's interesting as you look at say 90 days to 180 days. Right. You do have this person who controls the purse, who likely is not well versed in, again, that technology stack, the meanings of the words, the actual threats that lay over the horizon. There's an awful lot of these weird blanks that haven't been filled in for this person, and then we're going to ask them to write a check at the end of the adventure. You've got this technical person who can largely rule you out, right, but can't necessarily give you the check under any circumstances.
Right.
And then you've got this user who's going to be sitting there like watching the reports come in and deciding like, oh no, those are our own people trying to access while they're on a business trip in China. And those people over there are the bad guys. They need to understand the system on day one. And is it too complex for them to be able to do that? You've got to juggle all these balls. And let's give you a full, 180 days. How many touches are you doing in that amount of time? How many meetings does it take to educate all those different stakeholders?
It's probably about a half a dozen, right? It starts with really an introduction, due diligence, kind of discovery type approach to a conversation, whether that's in person or over the phone. We jump right into the demonstration of our stack and our program because it does demonstrate beautifully. But the approach you're going to take is, normally it's build big, thick walls around your assets and hope for the best. And the reality is when 20% of your traffic is only going north and south,
right?
It's not real hard to bypass a perimeter anymore, right? So we ended up through some relationships I had. A former colleague of mine went to work for an Israeli-based startup their mission in life was to bring visibility to data center and cloud assets because their philosophy was if you can't see it, you can't secure it, right? So Their focus is visibility detection, deception, and then microsegmentation, which is another area we're very, very passionate about.
It's interesting to me that the visuals and demonstration piece, it sounded, you didn't say it explicitly, but it sounded like what you were kind of insinuating there was that when people see the demo, it fills in some of those blanks I was talking about a few minutes ago, where it's like they may not fully understand the official wording or your wording. They may not fully understand what the layers should be or usually are, but when they see it, they say, okay, I can understand what this report is telling me, what this visualization is telling me, what this user cockpit heads up looks like, and that helps you bridge some of those gaps.
No doubt.
The people you're protecting against, if they're doing their jobs right, are undetectable. So in other words, absent that compliance or, just sort of like didactic, we should do this sort of an urgency behind the sale, a lot of people won't do anything because they didn't know anybody was on their network in the first place. And that, as a sales and marketing person, kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies, right? So like I think about,
you have to wait for something bad to happen, right?
Don't you hate it? Yeah. Don't you hate that thought?
And I know I'd be less than honest with you if I didn't tell you that maybe 35 to 40% of our customers in this first year of us being open were born out of them having an incident.
Something happens, yeah.
My argument would be that I think with traditional approaches and by traditional approaches I mean building those big thick walls, right? That's what gets the board level attention, right? When you and I both know
because it feels right.
It feels right? But the reality is if there's a will, there's a way. If somebody wants access to something that I have in my home, and I have a security system on my home, they could throw something through the window. If they they
really
right?
want it, yeah.
But most of the people that are performing these bad acts anymore don't want to be detected, right? Because it needs to be repeatable. The undetected side of it, I would agree, and it's just back to a decision we made early on, which was around, okay, let's take an inside-out approach to this as opposed to an outside-in. If basically the biggest blind spot any organization are the applications and the data they have in their data centers or in a public cloud, okay, we've already established that people can work around perimeter controls undetected.
Yeah.
Right? I could actually take over someone's machine and use their VPN and end up in their data center without anybody knowing, and then sit dormant until I want to move laterally and start collecting privileged access accounts from a directory services. You need some sort of tooling, some sort of eyes visibility to see when they move laterally east-west, right? And that's where I think most of the folks that we compete against have missed the mark a lot.
Have they missed the mark, or have they gone where the money is?
Well, I would say they've more or less gone where the money is. Right?
It feels right.
Well, it's easy to sell.
Big wall sells.
It's easy to sell compliance services, right? In most of our competitors are either very large sales organizations or they are publicly traded.
Yeah.
So their salespeople are on a 90-day hamster wheel, right? I lived it. I lived it, right, for multiple years. And it's by hook or by crook, get to the number, right? Even if that means, Mr. Customer, I really should put some monitoring services on your perimeter firewalls. Well, that's awesome. I mean, it's needle in a haystack, today, it's a requirement and a need, but is not really going to help the overall security of your customer.
So the accusation is it's quota driven instead of being need driven, and you guys are really playing a small portfolio of clients.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a difficult thing for a lot of people, right? You have the skill set where you can do this, and a lot of people are not necessarily cut out for it. What is it that makes it so that you feel comfortable in this environment, other than product knowledge? So in other words, why can you do this difficult job?
I think a diverse background, choices I either made, cognitively or I made going into it, or just accidents that happened in my career, have shaped kind of my background, right?
Yeah.
Making a decision early on to start down the path of pursuing a career in sales and marketing on the technology side, but investing the first 4 or 5 years of my career in learning the basics about technology, about networking, about all that, all the stuff that really matters when it comes to being able to be credible.
Yeah.
Right. I made those investments, and I did that knowingly. Right. But then I took an entrepreneurial route and really learned a lot of lessons. It was either go get an MBA or open my own business. And I chose the latter, and it was probably more valuable from an educational perspective than the MBA.
I think it definitely can be,
but was far more painful.
Also true
of a process, but I learned a ton about myself and about my approach from that failure.
I would say honestly, knowing yourself is probably the most useful thing you can learn.
Well, self-awareness. I think self-awareness is almost everything. People that know me really well, know me as a pretty emotional guy, right? Who wears his emotions on his sleeve, and unfortunate things that have happened to me during my career, which were 99.99999% self-inflicted, were based on that emotional side of me. But
see, I actually think that that's one of the skills that you've got, is that it's not in fact self-inflicted, but that you took ownership of it because you were the only person that you could control.
No, that would be my dad's answer, no doubt.
Yeah, your dad's a smart guy. I like your dad. You were just on a panel, and I understand that they're going to publicize that, I guess, sometime in the next month or so.
I think so, yeah. They invited 2 folks from academia in, and then 2 folks that were more on the front lines when it comes to delivering services. And it was getting their perspectives, right? Yeah. Because we talked about the job deficits, right? And what do you do, right? And the 2 folks that were there, a gentleman from Geneva College, the other one from Community College of Beaver County.
Okay.
Which both of them had awesome perspectives on things, very, very different worlds they live in, right? One a faith-based college and then a community college, right? Both of them in the process of building out cybersecurity bachelor's degrees, right? They're programs for those things. And we all were looking at really how to tackle the people problem, how to tackle the time problem, how to tackle the technology problem. Where are there still a lack of knowledge and investment from an upper management or executive level within inside these organizations? And that's, I made a comment about, when the lights are on and the microphone's on, people love to talk about how this challenge is a strategic priority. Oh yeah,
cybersecurity is.
And then the second, the
window dressing for sure, they love it.
The second the microphone gets pushed away from their face, and someone comes to them with a request for a full-time employee to serve in some sort of cyber capacity, it's we're not going to do that.
It's an expensive employee, though.
Very. Yep. That's the thing that keeps us up at night. Actually, is the talent retention, the talent acquisition funnel. And that's what was really cool about the panel, was I was able to establish connection with these 2 guys who are building, the next practitioners and leaders in the cybersecurity realm. So we were able to strike up really some unique conversations around how can we set up an internship program, right? To feed our kids into real world experiences, whether it's a true co-op or whether it's an intern, in the summer, or when they're down, when they have off time. It was great.
Speaking as your friend and advocate, right? The shortest, fastest path to a marketing answer here, whether it's a technical answer, is, I think, already on record. You're saying it's not. Or at least it's not as much as people market it as. And the future just isn't materialized enough yet to say, we're going to solve that 3 million job deficit with big computers, like lots of rack space, right? IBM Watson is here and he's going to make everything better. I think as a marketer, that is something, again, I'm not saying it's right, but if my job is to follow the money,
right,
that's what I'm going to do. Is I'm going to go tell the guy in the necktie, what you need to do is invest in this machine learning thing that we developed. And he goes, oh, great, because I've been hearing about how there's not enough people to staff these.
Yeah, I've seen the commercial with, talking about IBM Watson, and that stuff is...
And I've heard that's not always gone so great with the Watson, but anyway.
Well, any of the art, and I'm not anti artificial intelligence. I'm not anti machine learning. The math plays out, right? Especially in the machine learning side.
You think it can why it works,
right? But that it's effective when the base premise is that the environments that it's either looking over or gets installed in are hygienic and sanitized.
Also, okay, yeah, I get that.
I mean, almost every breach you see or hear about is tied to some sort of vulnerability that wasn't patched, or tied to an end user who probably has never been through a security awareness program.
So if I'm in that 60,000 employee organization, and I'm trying to figure out how everybody's going to beat the stock number that was predicted, I'm going to say, look, go out there and tell them about AI, machine learning, predictive technology, just like they saw playing on Jeopardy last night, right? Yes, that's a Watson joke. And the person across the table will buy because A, they want to believe in it. And that's kind of what I'm saying, is they want to believe that that's the answer. And B, it solves their FTEs or expensive conundrum.
Oh, right. Being able to do more with less. Absolutely. And I would say the big enterprise shops, right, that you're describing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Those kinds of tools, those kinds of platforms play really well because they have at least some really qualified staff to wield them effectively. It's kind of the rest of that addressable market, which is where we have as an organization have focused our time, where you sit down and talk to them like, well, we heard from this manufacturer and they have this artificial intelligence and machine learning I can put on my endpoints and solve all these problems. And you're like, dude, you haven't updated the firmware in your firewall. I mean, you have 3 rules.
You understand that machine learning and artificial intelligence is the brought to you by Carl's Jr. of the modern age. Right?
It is. So from our perspective, the AI stuff and the machine learning, in again looking at it through the lens of an operational side of things, those kinds of tools going into our customers' environments without them doing the basic blocking and tackling, making sure that all of the basics have been taken care of, creates more alert fatigue for our team, creates way more challenges from an operational perspective with false positives. So those systems will create a ton of false positives in a unhygienic environment.
Absolutely. Andy Hicks, bluebastion.net. Andy, if people want to reach out to you, how do they get you?
Through the website or email address ahicks@bluebastion.net. It's probably the easiest way.
Thanks for coming in, man.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you, man.
All right, that's all the time we've got this week. Thanks to Andy and everybody over at Blue Bastion. This was a great episode filled with a lot of useful information, and hopefully it helps you to reframe your perspective on some things that you're working on in your own environment. Be sure to subscribe if you're not already, and look for us on social media. It's PITCHWERKS. We'll catch you next week.
The Pitchwerks podcast comes to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a production of the Epicast Network and McTaggart, LLC. Engineering and production by Buzzy Torek and Nick Miller. For more information, show feedback, and ad sales, visit pitchwerks.com. PITCHWERKS.com. On social media, find and follow the show on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram using that same brand name, PITCHWERKS.